Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the Game Week 9 pod of the FPL Wire. I'm your host, Zophar, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Lateriser, along with a special guest. Why don't you introduce him, Hila?
I'm so excited to have Pras on here. I remember it was, I think, a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe, Pras, where, there was a triple game week for United. And I was like, you know what, there's something here where we should just get a couple of United fans that I know. And I just randomly messaged Pras saying, you want to get on? And there he was. And, not many people know, I've known him for more than a decade now. We're a part of the Scout Forums. We interacted with him tons. Very, very happy to see him become an essential part of the content community. I mean, the way he explains the situation and the macro and the meta and the helicopter view, I think very few people are able to do that. So welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on here, Pras.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words. Look, all the things that you've said, I can only reciprocate because this is one of my favorite pods. I never ever miss it, and you guys are just so clear with what you kind of talk about. No BS, straight to the point. So yeah, very much look forward to it, and thank you again for having me on.
Great, Pras. It's great having you on. It's a huge upgrade. Last time we had you on, it was like, and I'm going to show my age here, it was like Windows 3.1, and now you're like Windows 95 straight. Generational upgrade. Not many of our viewers will get
you, by the way, Zoff. I mean, the cuts on the face, etc. You've been working out.
Yeah,
I mean, people at home are noticing. My mother was telling me, tell Zoff, he's looking so much better now.
Thank you. Auntie's the best. Great.
Any competition with Big Man Bakkar's DMs now? Because I'm sure after seeing that face, the thing must be shifting.
Not even close.
Just more reasons for Bakkar to whine about.
You need an Instagram account, Zophar.
Oh, yeah. And you start doing my team reveals on Instagram. Let's get started, guys. I'll just do a sponsor plug, then we jump right in. All data you see on the FPL Wire is taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. The new improved members area is now up and running, and the new comparison tool lets you compare key stats for up to 3 players. Player projections are also live, and as always, you can access the custom stats table we create or make one for yourself. Sign up for membership today using our affiliate link in the description below. Right. If any of you guys are wondering why we aren't playing the DreamSetGo logo, we unfortunately parted ways with them as a sponsor. I haven't updated the main image yet, but we are in the market for new sponsors, so do get in touch with us on Gmail if you are interested.
And speaking of plugs, Pras and Andy Sonaldo, they do a great show on the FF Scout channel as well. I think they're podding this Thursday. Is it Pras? It's called The Burning
right.
Questions. If you haven't already seen it, you're missing out. You need to watch these guys on the Fantasy Football Scout channel on YouTube.
Great. Let's start off. Pras, so Pras, you're on Wildcard. How's the international break been? Tinkering, settled?
We talk about international break for tinkering. I haven't touched my draft, the one that I had from last weekend. I only sort of look at different iterations, but there's no tinkering. And it's been a break. The only thing is I sleep better in the night because I know that if there's a big injury, then I'll just deal with it on the wildcard. That's all there is to it. But even that, the price changes haven't happened. It's been okay, and we'll talk about it. I don't feel that different to the Game Week 8 wildcard anyway.
And he made a great point last week, on the burning questions, is that it's very important not to, on this Game Week 9 wildcard to be different for the sake of being different. Just because like Game Week 8 guys did this, so I'm going to do this. Just pick what you think is the team that's going to score the most points, irrespective of what those guys did. I think that has to be the approach, and I wanted to outline that going forward.
Absolutely.
So, Edar, go on.
Nothing. I just think when you're building that wildcard, and if the tenure for you to build that wildcard is over a period of almost 2 weeks, I think it's always the first 2 or 3 days when your thoughts are sort of forming. I think then it's a lull where you're not really thinking about it for 6 or 7 days. And again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday comes in and you start really questioning every decision again. So I'm glad we're arriving and talking about your wildcard on a Monday. I think it'll lead for nice neutral discussion. Let's dive right into it, Zof. We got the fixtures first?
Yes, let's have a look at the fixtures and what here catches your eyes, guys. Let's talk about the fixtures first, and then we'll go position by position, various options and stuff like that.
The first thing that catches your eye is that the good teams are playing the good teams in the next 3 or 4 game weeks. And how do you tackle something like that? With game week 12 being City versus Arsenal, which is going to be a blank as well. So I think those are the 2 key factors which are going to dictate the wildcard, from what I've seen on Twitter, from what I've seen on YouTube, except for, I think, the key factor that is Liverpool. I don't see much of a difference between the game week 8 and the game week 9 wildcards. I think the inclusion of Salah for sure, and probably Trent is a big factor. So, Pras, when you first started building your wildcard team, what were the 2 or 3 things that you wanted to be sure of?
So I think first, in terms of the fixtures, I think the two things that stand out is there's 2 phases that are coming up. So there's only now 8 game weeks left. And so there's one mini phase, which is until game week 12, which is how do you navigate this period in which City is playing Liverpool, City is playing, Arsenal is playing Liverpool. And there's a blank. And then after that, how do you set your team up for the time after game week 12, which is, again, you don't want to jump off the good teams. So as I was setting up the team, I think you start with the fact that who do you want as your premiums, so the basic stuff. But I think what I have found helpful in the game week 9 wildcard is the enablers, because I can sort of now plan the team to say, these are the 3 or 4 guys that I want them to step in for the tough fixtures, whether that is a Crystal Palace player or a West Ham player. We'll come to the deal, the team by team details. But I think that's sort of been helpful because I've had 1 week of information like Emerson's or Nico Williams or Patterson's. And so therefore the enablers has been a little bit of a help. But other than that, I think we didn't learn anything about Chelsea. That game week 8 wildcards didn't know. You would have hoped that Chilwell would have played for England. He hasn't. So we have no clue other than what Potter will tell us. Liverpool, again, we had the Ajax game, but nothing after that. Some of the benefits will be that, Salah and Trent have got a week rest. But apart from that, we don't know if they're going to gel better or not in the Premier League. So I don't really feel that there is more information other than what we've learned in the international break through injuries or other things that they'll say in the press conferences.
There is one thing that's slightly different about this international break is generally you have lots of people coming in on the Thursday, etc., people playing in South America or something of that. Most of the South American teams, as far as I understand, are playing their fixtures in Europe. So with the exception of maybe Colombia, because Luis Diaz is arriving a little late. I think everybody has sort of a clean slate in terms of the time required to travel and then having a quick turnaround. So that's something that's slightly different, because normally what we see is the first game week after an international break, teams aren't really back into it. But I think it might be slightly different this time around, because they do have 3 or 4 full days of training, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right, then Zoff, you want to move straight to defense, because what we're going to do is we're going to do position by position, and we're going to talk about it from both perspectives, from the wildcard perspective, as well as if there are transfers that any of us are looking at. So we'll sort of tackle everything position by position like we did on the last pod.
Right. Let's talk goalkeepers first. And I think this is a big topic of contention. I watched Baker's stream. I watched you guys on Burning Questions, and it seems to be quite a difficult proposition, because initially my thoughts were that the Guaita and Ward or Guaita and Iverson combo makes sense, but there's obviously that niggling doubt of the Palace keeper randomly getting rotated, right? I think.
Yeah, see, you've hit the nail on the head. I have no clue who I want as goalkeeper. Goalkeeper is almost like, the balancing of the equation. Like, I'll set up my 14, and then whoever I can afford, I'll go for that keeper, because I feel like Pope is a fine pick. And so goalkeeper is one of those classic cases where people are trying to sort of be different for the sake of being different. You can say that Newcastle have been sort of, they disappointed against Bournemouth, but nothing really has changed on Newcastle's thinking. People are going for triple ups on game week 8, so why not go for Pope on game week 9? But let me talk about my thinking generally. Look, Ward and Iverson is actually fine. I mean, I don't think it's such a bad play. I know they've been burnt. People have been burnt in the first 8 game weeks. I was ready to take the plunge as soon as Brendan Rodgers, or if Brendan Rodgers was sacked. Now, that doesn't look like happening, so I'm not going there. Essentially, that million is not worth it. There is nowhere I can park it. Then you get to Guaita. I think he's still the best keeper as long as he is nailed, because I think Crystal Palace last year, they showed that they're a good defense. Just because Gallagher is not in the team, Eze is in, I don't think that makes that much of a difference. But the numbers are telling us that it does make a difference. They're conceding more shots. Their XG conceded is way worse than last season. Again, that makes me skeptical. I mean, especially this table that you've shown here, Guaita is not putting in that performance, or, Crystal Palace are letting in shots and he's not preventing the goals. So then you come back to Pope, or you come back to a Chelsea keeper, if you know who's nailed, and you'll see my wild card somebody else.
So why not Pope? Let's approach that first. Like you said, let's not be different for the sake of being different. And obviously the premium guys, I know, like Allison, etc., we can talk about them first, but let's talk first. Why not Pope? LR, what are your thoughts, sir?
No reason. 0 reasons. Pope's a good keeper. Pope should be first choice. The only reason I can foresee why you don't want to go Pope is if you need money. He's, if you set up in a lab and you set up a keeper made for FPL, put in a good team, for good clean sheets, defensively solid, stable, what will crop up is Pope. So why not Pope? I don't have a good reason for that, except if you need money. So that's my only reason.
Yeah, because I was having a look at the fixtures. The fixtures are going to go back. You look at the home fixtures for Newcastle, right? Because they've been so good defensively at St. James Park. 10 is home to Brentford, who are good in attack, but there could be a clean sheet there. 12 for Everton, looks like a good clean sheet. 14, Villa is decent. Southampton, 15, Chelsea, not so much. So out of the next, 8 weeks, you can say possibly 3 to 4 clean sheets there, which is good enough, in my opinion.
And even outside of that, I like the fact that there are 2 or 3 difficult games, because if there are 2 or 3 difficult games in there, I'd put good money on the fact that out of 3 games which are difficult, Newcastle are going to keep clean sheet in one of them, and the one that they will keep a clean sheet in, Pop's likely odds on for a double-digit haul in that sort of a game. So he's got the saves. So even if they're playing a tough team, he's going to get 6, 7, 8 saves. He's going to rack them up. So I just think, unless you need money, you go Pope. Simple as that.
Okay, my case for not Pope is simply you don't want to double up. So I hear your argument that they'll probably keep 3 clean sheets, and I see that. But then you have Trippier as well, and Trippier is a gift at 5.2, right? I mean, I get the argument. You want to look at them in isolation. You can probably look at Trippier as a 5 million pick and Pope as a goalkeeper pick. You have to now compare Pope with Alisson or with Edison, or because that's the bracket he's in, or even Mendy. So you can get Mendy and Kepa for 4.9, 4.3. That's a total of as if you're getting a 5.2 keeper. So I know we have a Chelsea fan here who is going to tell us that Potter Ball is going to change everything, and it's going to be great owning a Chelsea keeper. But is Pope in an Alisson good, or a Mendy good, or an Edison good? That's the question.
He's better.
The thing with Edison right now, again, game week 12 is the issue, and we don't know by the time if Ward will be sticking around, if you're willing to forego that. I guess Edison is fine because it's a fixture. But again, Edison blocks you out from the triple up, right? We still want to have the option of the KDB or even a Foden. We're seeing Foden is so consistent from game week 13. You might want to get Foden in where we have in that Madison slot. So that to me is the main drawback of Edison. And defensively, again, same thing applies to Liverpool. There might be a situation where you want the 3 slots over there. So that's why I don't like going to the big teams for the goalkeeper primarily.
Yeah, so Pras, I mean, when you sent us your wildcard team, and I was like, is there anything I want to talk Pras out of? And it's probably going to be that Alisson pick. Because there's a couple of things that are playing on my mind. The first thing is the fixtures for Liverpool. Even if Liverpool sort of improved defensively, until 16, you're looking at Arsenal, City, Leeds, and Spurs. I see them conceding in 3 out of these 4 games. I'm going to give Leeds that much respect because I think they are an attack first team and they're capable of taking on a team like Liverpool. So I feel like I just don't like the fixtures for clean sheets. And we yet don't know whether Jota or Diaz or Nunes become a factor. And it's something I always tell Zoff as well. You have to leave the possibility open for that explosive asset that might open up in the game. Something like that is something we probably don't foresee in a Newcastle. But in a Liverpool, an attacker who's probably going to cost you 8 to 9 million, who could offer points that a premium does, like I don't like blocking that. That's all.
I hear you. And I did have that discussion with myself that if a Diaz becomes viable, but you know what I was thinking? I'm thinking if a Diaz becomes viable, do I want a Diaz versus a Saka versus a Foden? Basically, we're talking after game week 12, right? Because that's the 4-week stretch. I'm not convinced that it'll be Diaz. And if Nunes becomes a thing, then maybe Salah isn't the thing. So I'm trying to sort of think, do I really need that third Liverpool? Like, I get the argument for City because Foden could be it, a second City defender in Walker or anybody else could be it, or even KDB.
Yeah.
I don't see the same for Liverpool. And this is strange because I have Trent and Salah on my wildcard, and yet I'm saying I'm not that convinced on the third. Maybe Robertson, but then again, for who? I don't have the budget.
Yeah, I know. Tsimikas could be an option from what we know actually. Last news I read which was on Friday or Saturday, and I think we might get news in terms of timeline for Robert maybe closer to Thursday or Friday. But I think I read a bit of news where it looks like Robbo could not play the first or second game after the international break as well, and they could rest him for a longer period. So we don't know what's happening there. But I just think, I mean, Diaz so far has done nothing wrong for us to consider him as an asset. And I think Jota and Nunes are explosive enough at 9 million for them to become options. And I don't think you're gaining much. Yeah, frankly speaking, I don't think you're gaining much going Alisson over Pope for that spot. If you went 4.5 million, I'd be all for it because I have a 4.5 million, 4.0 keeper combination that I personally quite like. And I mean, people have been... So there are a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, people are worried about Guaita losing his place. One thing that's changed in this entire ecosystem is if you are picking a wildcard keeper in game week 9, you're not going to hold him until game week 30, which is normally the case. The odds of something like that happening in just a short period of 8 game weeks, I feel like if you are worried about that just for 8 weeks, you have 3 pairs of socks on. You don't need to worry about things so much. It's just 8 game weeks. Like the odds of something going wrong in such a short period isn't too high. And the second thing is, the problem is with this keeper combination, the fixtures are slightly difficult. I don't think they're conducive to clean sheets. But what I've noticed is in this league now, we have front foot teams and we have a couple of teams that are defense first teams. And Everton, with the inclusion of Onana and Idrissa Gueye in midfield, and Tarkowski and Cody, I think a perception needs to change there. Where Lampard has strictly become set up the bus and counter with his fast-paced wingers, Gordon and Gray. They're sort of like the old Burnley template. They're also conceding a lot of shots, but not many big chances. They've conceded 11 big chances so far. And they're one of the few teams offering you a 4.5, 4.0 duo. Where even if you're worried too much about people, getting rotated or, Pickford's not fit at the moment. We are speculating that he might start in game week 9. But if you're looking at 4.5 million, I don't think there's anything wrong with Guaita. My issue with Guaita largely is I don't know if I want to trust them defensively at the moment.
Yep.
I'm beginning to trust a team like Everton who are defense first. So going to concede shots. Pickford is going to rack up the saves. I sort of like that combination more. The problem is 10 to 12, the fixtures are difficult for Everton. But I think there's a double-digit haul in there. I don't mind the tough fixtures too much. That's all.
Yep. I hear you. I mean, given Pope's price, you can even go 4.5s. You can go
Yeah.
Guaita and Pickford, or or Raya or someone. I mean, that's also, it's the price, man. I mean, Pope is a no-brainer if he was
The
like
price,
4.8 or 4.7.
I think in the
Yeah, fair enough.
4.5s,
So,
I actually prefer the Everton duo now that you think about. Because Palace, the thing is, last year, you remember the big chances conceded, they were abnormally low. They were always like something like third, fourth, but this year there's something like 18, 19. So I think there has been some change in philosophy / personal, whatever you call it, in terms of Palace. They don't feel as solid.
yeah.
I mean, they have played really, really tough games, but I hear you. I mean, in terms of, it doesn't get tougher than they've played Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, and Newcastle in the first
So,
4 out of the
but what
6.
about West Ham now?
And
They've played
also,
a similar run of fixtures.
just Zoff, before we progress to West Ham, there's one I want to talk about because we want to offer a balanced point of view. The good thing about Palace is that what I remember is before game week 1, Vieira had half the team in Australia and half the team in Europe, and it was a very staggered preseason for them. So they haven't really had a proper preseason where the team's been training for a long time. Now, Palace is one of the few teams that has had an off for a month now. They haven't played in game week 7 and 8. So I feel like they've also sort of had a mini preseason now. They've gotten 3 or 4 solid game weeks. And if you trust somebody like a Vieira, because they did keep 12 clean sheets since he arrived last season, and that's a solid number. So if you're believing that and if you're trusting the manager, I think it's fine because they now have had a solid preseason. I think that makes a difference.
My first instinct on Wildcard, the first draft I made, I had Guaita and Kepa. As in, basically, Kepa as the insurance that, if he starts for Chelsea, fine. Otherwise, it's 0.4 that I've sort of wasted, but it's not the end of the world. And then you have Guaita as well. So, what do you think about Chelsea, Zoff? I mean, is it worth going for a Kepa type, or is it a waste?
I don't know if he's going to hold on to the shirt, but he might. As LR mentioned on one of our previous episodes, he's much better with his feet, with something Potter might fancy. But the whole team might take a while to gel. But the good thing is with Chelsea, you more likely won't need that third one. So I don't mind the Kepa Mendy also. If you're going for that, how much is Mendy now? Is 4.9-ish now?
4.9 and 4.4. So you'll get the combo for almost like a 5.3 keeper.
It's almost like the 5.3 keeper, right? That's not bad if you get both, but then you can't get the third guy, midfield guy, because you'll obviously have James.
You want Chilwell, you want the optionality of Chilwell and Sterling, I think.
And something
So
that
you can't
opens
go
up.
for that.
Yeah, so yeah.
I feel there's a bigger opportunity for a third Chelsea than a third Liverpool at the moment because we don't know about Chelsea.
But
I disagree, Pras, and I'm going to talk you out of it. Don't go there. You might need that option. And I'm genuinely feeling a lot of Diego Jota love, and we'll talk about that when we're talking about forwards. But after this discussion, let's have some rankings in place. Zoff, I'll come to you first.
I think
Where would you go?
I still like Pope because purely because of the number of saves he's going to make bonus. We saw XG per shot, Newcastle are still the best. But if price is an issue, it's close between Everton and Palace. I like the point that you made about Vieira's defense and having time to work. So I would probably go Guaita after that, then the Pickford Begovic combo, and then Fabianski.
I agree with your rating. I'm on the same order. Russ?
Yeah, and look, I don't disagree. I'm just throwing in Alisson as somebody who I'm considering because of the price. I do get the issues with it. I mean, tomorrow Robertson gets injured and Tsimikas becomes the best defender in the game, and then you lose optionality. So I do get the issue there.
Also, it's mainly my opinion changed about Alisson when I looked at the fixtures. They're fixtures in which I want attackers, not defenders. Just that sort of thing came to my head. That's all.
Fair. I think in my draft that 5.4 keeper can be Pope, can be Mendy, can be something else.
Yeah. Right. And I don't think you need to worry about Guaita +1. If it doesn't work, doesn't work. It's 8 game weeks. It's not going to be as painful.
And I think Maxon might be one game. I don't think he's going to be out for an extended period as such.
It's also the Chelsea first game. So if you go Kepa, you play Kepa in the first game, then you have an insurance for the next 7 games. That was the thinking. But anyway, we'll go on.
Before we move on to now discussing defenders, midfielders, just to highlight the schedule in this excellent graph by Lego Mane, you see a lot of red for Liverpool over here. The red is with the 2-day short turnaround. Now, what has happened with Man City, because of that game week 12 being a blank, they have automatically got a bit of a rest period that midweek, and they are quite more comfortably placed in the Champions League than Liverpool are. So you can expect them to rest their guys in the Champions League from, let's say, game week 13, 14, 15, etc., on, which might not be the case for Liverpool. So, and we've already been burnt once by a Trent 57th, 58th minute substitution. It's very possible that happens again during this run, don't you guys think?
I feel like Liverpool have had a lot of break. I mean, they apart from Ajax, basically they've played that Ajax game in the 1 month period.
Right, but
similar to
that
Crystal
doesn't
Palace.
matter, right? Because once you enter the period, once you start a period of 3 games in 10 days, it's like starting from scratch. It doesn't matter if you've not played for 1 month before. Fatigue within a week
Yeah,
is still fatigue within that week, irrespective of it has some effect. But again, the whole sports science stuff, and we know Liverpool, they are big on the whole sports science. For example, that West Ham Nottingham Forest is Wednesday, again Saturday early kickoff. We've seen that that's what happened
Yeah,
with Everton as well.
Look, I think it'll impact Diaz, Darwin, Jota, Firmino slightly more than. I mean, the precedent has been set with Trent getting subbed off at 57th minute, so we cannot say anything. I mean, if you'd asked last season, you'd have said Trent plays every game, Robbo plays every game, Salah plays every game. So yes, possibly, but I think that equally, I think if you look at City over the next 4 matches, they have 3 reds coming up because they play Wednesday, they play Saturday, and then they play Tuesday. So given the rest could come in the Champions League, but equally you could say that the rest could come Southampton at home, which is the banker game that you want your players to play in. So I think it can work both ways, but I think for the first time we can think that your Liverpool players aren't as nailed as you thought they were.
And so
Yeah, but I'm with you on that, Pras. I'm not too worried about rest rotation. And again, Trent is going to have the Madison effect with the not getting into the squad for the World Cup, etc. Klopp knows he doesn't have to rest him for the World Cup, likely as of now. So that's also something that's going to it matters with these players. It just puts a fire up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right? So I think it's going to showcase in his performances as well. So I'm not too worried there.
Just one thing I want to mention about City's schedule. Now they do play United, Copenhagen, Southampton, Copenhagen, but the first 3 games are all at home. And you remember the comments that Pep made a few weeks earlier. He says when the games are at home, rest and recovery aren't as much as a problem without travel and all that stuff. And effectively, if they win the second game against Copenhagen, they top their group. Yeah. So effectively, by game week 10 or game week 11, they're already Champions League is already done. That I think is a major carrot for City assets.
Yeah. So you're right now saying that if you're going for one between Cancelo and Trent, you're currently leaning Trent.
Now, there are various factors to that now. Like you can talk about it. The immediate schedule does look easier for Liverpool. And there's also the game week 12 factor. But my question is, could they possibly play the same number of games even with the blank because of rotation?
Yeah, I'm not worried about rotation when it comes to either, generally speaking, because I think they're 2 of the least rotation-prone players in their respective teams. So I'm not particularly worried about that. And then it comes down to objectively assessing what they're capable of. And I got very miffed because Trent wasn't as attacking against Wolves also. And, Cancelo in the last game week. And then you and Baker rightly pointed out, yeah, but when he's not attacking, he's going to get 3 bonus points because he does all the good things. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. And comfortably the best defense in the league right now are Manchester City. And I always want to lean towards getting Cancelo out of my team because you're not seeing the good attacking things. But you need to think a lot before you're thinking of doing that. If I was on Wildcard, I'll go both. And if I were to keep one, I'd still lean Cancelo because I trust them defensively more.
That's what I'm as well.
I think that's fair.
I've seen a lot of drafts going around without Cancelo, and I don't like that. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I can talk as a wildcarder. You have a choice basically. Who do you want to lose out of Martinelli and Cancelo? Because you're trying to calibrate how many players you want to bench in game week 12. And for me, it's a non-starter. Like I will want Cancelo from game week 13 onwards because of the reasons that you just mentioned. They're going to get a midweek break, which is like unheard of for City at this time of the year. So it almost will reset, and you want these players. So for me, Cancelo and Haaland are the 2 top players. I don't want to lose them. And then it came down to whether I want to lose Martinelli or Cancelo. Absolutely, I think Cancelo should be the one that stays. Southampton at home is one of those home fixtures where we've seen 2 game weeks in the past where he's hauled, basically got a clean sheet and an attacking return, and that looks like a game that you can get. And he scored against Man City, I think double assist last season as well, same fixture.
Against United,
he's not a guy you sort of... They can keep a clean sheet against anyone.
Exactly.
But if there is a time to swerve him, it's now because of the 12 blank, I think. Like if you want to play the game for 4 game weeks where you're getting a game against United, a game against Liverpool and 1 blank, if there is a time to roll the dice, it's now. Like if somebody wants to go all the way.
Who's putting his hand up though? Who is? I mean, Robertson, you could have thought about to save like 0.4 in value, but I'm not going for Robertson.
you got Trent, Reece, and Trippier as your three main defenders.
Even
You
Then
Trent's
you're
swerve that.
fixtures,
taking the
Arsenal.
money in midfield.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even
Yeah.
Liverpool's fixtures, you look at it, it's like what, Arsenal away and then City. Even over then, West Ham is okay, fine, but even then it's like what, 2 out of 4 clean sheets. At City probably get the same.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I was thinking, so if you take Cancelo down to a small, basically 4.4 defender, people are basically putting that money up front, either in
Yes.
Tony or in Bowen or somebody, basically not a Madison or Zaha, because you can still afford them. Then I'm thinking, who's getting more points, Tony, Bowen, or Cancelo? It's always Cancelo, in my mind at least. It's always the guy will get a clean sheet, at least one attacking return over the next 3. Cancelo for me is the guy.
No, when I was building my wildcard, and there's a reason I went to 4.0 million defenders, is because I think 9 to 12 isn't going to be so extreme, but people who jump on 13 to 16 on the right assets, because we're going to look at those fixtures in a short time, I think there's a lot of points to be made in especially 13 and 14. So I know how I like to play the game. I'm like, at that point, will I want Trent, or will I want to maybe, if possible, take a punt on a third Liverpool attacker that's slightly big because there's a potential for a hat trick, etc. So I think that might also define structure and how you want to play the game in that period.
So let's just do a quick rankings again, guys. I think in terms of we are unanimous, Cancelo, Trippier still top 2.
Yeah, I mean, Trippier and James are top 2, and I think there is a
James too,
decision
definitely,
between
of course.
Cancelo and Trent at that price point.
Correct. I forgot about James, obviously. So James and Trippier probably top 2. Then Cancelo, Trent is like where the debate comes in. What about the 4th and 5th guys, the budget guys?
Pras, you looked into the fixtures.
Well, I'm looking at Guehi, 4.3, good option. I've looked at Justin, again, not due to my Leicester love, but it's basically good fixture in 12. You would have sort of looked at Sufal, but again, the game week 12 problem. You don't want to play him in game week 12. I think Nico Williams is fine. Patterson would have been great, but it looks like he's injured. So there are lots of options, but I think in my wildcard, I'm going for 4 at the back. So 4 big hitters, all the 4 that we talked about: Trippier, Cancelo, James, and Trent. So the 5th one is Guehi. So I think that's where I'm at the moment. I would love to move him up to Fofana. I mean, but again, we have no info on Chelsea, absolutely nothing. So
not worth it in
it's
my
Guehi.
opinion. Yep. Yeah,
I mean, outside of the names that. Yeah, go on, Zoff.
No, I was saying I like the Palace guys. I like West Ham also, despite their game week 12 fixture. I think again, because the fixtures either side, right? Because the thing is, in my setup, for example, I had Cancelo, Trippier, and James. So I was very conscious that any of these 3 guys could get randomly benched or rotated. So I always wanted the 4th guy to be sort of one who can step in any of these fixtures. Palace with the bill, and I think West Ham. Also, I think so far you don't like him in 12, but the fixtures other than that are really good. And they have changed a little bit. Now we are talking about front foot, back foot teams. West Ham now this year are very, very clearly a back foot team.
Yeah. I mean, but the question is, let's say if it's not rotation, would you ever start Sufal over a Trent or a Cancelo, even though they play Liverpool City? You won't, right?
Nope.
So basically, you're hoping for a no-show.
No, sure. It depends on 11 and 13 if you want to get funky with Trippier, because Trippier has United and Spurs then. And 16 also he has Chelsea.
Also, plus we are 3 at the back, not 4 at the back. So that 4th defender might be needed more often than we think.
Yeah,
that's the other thing.
Difference. Because you can get Andreas. You'll have Andreas sub in. He's a much stronger sub than, like, let's say Nico Williams or somebody like that.
A couple of names I just want to throw in the hat. I think Villa fixtures are very decent until 14 or 15. And Mings is just 4.3. It tends to do well. And we've heard Gerrard talk about how he wants to play pragmatic football. He's, again, I was talking to Adam Hopcroft and Tom Freeman as well. They're prioritizing defense first at the moment is how they're playing. The problem is that the defensive midfielder is injured, so we don't know how this might impact, but they're going to look at pragmatic football first. And another name, I mean, Patterson's injured, but I think Tarkowski at 4.4 million is a really good pick. Again, going under the radar just because he's an Everton player. They have a tough fixtures range from 9 to 12. But Tarkowski generally does well with bonus points. His baseline is pretty strong. And he's got a header goal in him as well. And I think what's the advantage with Tarkowski is his 13 to 16 is Palace, Fulham, Leicester, Bournemouth. I don't mind playing him during this time. And let's say you want to downgrade a defender so that you can get a cheap defender playing these games because you want to put the volume of money on the pitch in the big hitting attackers in that 13 to 16 phase. Somebody like that could be useful then. So depending on what kind of strategy you're employing, I don't mind somebody like an Everton who's got a stronger 13 to 16 because I'll want to spend money in attack 13 to 16. That's where I am.
Fair.
Fair enough.
There's one more name I want to throw in, which is Dunk or Webster, because actually Webster better because he's cheaper. Because their game in Game Week 12 is Forest at home. So that's basically as good as it gets.
Fair
Cool.
enough. Should we touch upon De Zerbi a little bit? What have you guys read about him? What do we
Well,
expect Brighton to be?
Just a question. I mean, based on what we saw in Potter's first game, though, why not Cucurella at 5.1 now? I think he's a good steady 5.1 to hold throughout game week 9 to 16. I don't mind that if you want to go a little cheaper. Again, the only reason I'm going to go cheaper is if you want to spend an attack. But he was playing exactly the role he was playing at Brighton, in my opinion. What are your thoughts there, Zoff?
So he was playing the overlapping centre back role, and the way he's using his left wing back is very similar to what Trossard. So I don't think at any point you're going to see Cucurella in the left wing back role. So effectively, he's going to be a centre back who breaks into the box every now and then. So which is effectively might be the equivalent of Fofana, but like significantly cheaper. That's A. And B, we don't know how good Chelsea will be defensively. I'm assuming that James is already a lock. So it's a bit of a shot in the dark to be going Cucurella when there are other players we know what they offer at a cheaper price. That's where I am on that.
The thing with Chelsea, so I looked at Cucurella as well, but as the fifth defender, and I felt like I'm then putting too much money in defense when you have such nice 4.3, 4.4 defenders. And if there was upside, I would go there, but I think that's my issue, as Zoff said. And the other problem is, I mean, I don't even know Chelsea's fixtures themselves. They've got 5 away games in the next 8. And the home games are the tougher games. So basically, that was my problem, that even if you sort of have a double Chelsea defense, will I even play Cucurella ahead of a Solanke? But we'll come to Solanke later because it's a touchy topic.
Should we move on now?
I think we've done enough.
Yeah, let's talk about the big topic. I think the heavy-hitting midfielders, and we need to spend some time over here. LR, why don't you walk us through this table which you created?
I mean, I was very curious because, we throw in the term Mo Salah very often now. I was largely aware that, Son and KDB have sort of been matching him since the second half of last season. And I just wanted to put down numbers to it and look deeper because I think a lot of us have to make this decision in Game Week 9 in terms of how are we planning to play the big hitters? Where are we at with the big hitters? What is everybody's weightage at the moment? And I just looked into these numbers, and what you see here in the first 3 columns is the data between Salah, KDB, and Son since the second half of last season, since Game Week 20 last season. And the following 2 tables, you will see their data in the current season and their data in the previous season in the second half. Now, let's just focus on the first 3 columns and in terms of understand what's been happening. And first of all, I do want to know that Son and KDB have played a couple of 100 minutes more than Salah in this period. So that's something you need to be mindful about. But have they been doing better than Salah for points? Yes, they have. And by quite a significant amount. They're like Salah's averaging 7 points per 90 compared to KDB doing 8.3 per 90 and Son doing 8 per 90. Now, without going into the specifics of it, what's changed is I think you take Salah's second half of last season with a pinch of salt because there was, I think, a pile-up and fatigue of over 3 or 4 years in terms of playing constantly that sort of did the talking there. So you do take that with a little pinch of salt because I think he played 3 or 4 back-to-back 120 minutes in AFCON as well, and that does tire you out. So you could see that he wasn't as sharp. And his role this season has slightly changed. When you look at his assist numbers in this season, they've gone up. So he's become slightly more creative. He's become slightly more wider, etc. But if you're looking at underlyings alone, he's still topping KDB and Son for XGI. And you need to look at XGI because he's got penalties and KDB and Son don't have penalties. And that's a factor. I don't think you can just look at non-penalty XGI because Liverpool is a team that will win 3, 4, 5 penalties a season. And that's a factor. So I think, I'll just dive a little more deeper into this in terms of what's happening. I feel like since Conte's come to Spurs, Son's become the striker in that Spurs team. And we know that he is up and down when it comes to patches of form. But I was looking, I think the biggest factor here is the over-under performance compared to their XG. Now, both De Bruyne and Son are +5 on their XG. So they've scored 5 more goals than their XG since the second half of last season, while Salah is down by 0.5. Now, I was looking at historical numbers, which is what adds to the context here. And Son, since the last 6-7 years, is around the +5, +6 mark. When I looked at Mo Salah's numbers, in the first 2 seasons, Salah had very hot seasons. He was +7, +3. And after that, he's moving around in the -1 to +1 range. So he's pretty much performing on par with XG in the last 4 or 5 seasons. So there are a few things that I want to read out of this. Do I think Son is a better finisher than Mo Salah as things stand? Yes. I feel like if Son is going to get an XG of 5 and Salah is going to get an XG of 5, I trust Son to get more goals than Salah at the moment. I think we've seen enough proof over the seasons to do something like that. The problem is Salah is going to probably compensate for that with penalties that the other two don't have. And in this entire equation, De Bruyne has been moving as a Rolls-Royce steady Eddie, outperforming the other two at a very consistent rate. That said, there was one very interesting quote actually that Guardiola spoke about. I want to actually cite it out to you guys because I noted it down because I thought that was quite interesting. Give me a second. Yes, this is Guardiola talking about Grealish after the game against Wolves last week. I never say he has to score a goal. I said to try, be more aggressive. Yeah. Kevin scored a lot of goals last season, but this year he's more about assists than the goals. And Gundo is an incredible runner in the box, as he showed perfectly against Aston Villa last season. When we are there, everyone has permission to open the door and go to the box. Nobody's not allowed to do that. Everyone can do this. I think that statement where Guardiola is citing that this year Kevin is a lot more about assists is quite telling. Because I think that role has changed. Because last season, it was all about false nine. So it was De Bruyne's responsibility to enter into the box and score those goals because they didn't have anybody there. This time, they just don't have Haaland. I feel like when Alvarez is going to play a part in the team, which he is going to, because they've been talking him up, and I think Pep is just waiting for him to get integrated in the squad. And even if not, the second runner in that City team at the moment is always Foden. He's always in and around the box. It's not De Bruyne. De Bruyne's role has primarily been of an assister. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but now, how does this impact things? I feel like Haaland is permanent captain and first choice premium in all three of our heads. Agree?
Agree.
For sure.
I think taking that into consideration, we're never really going to captain De Bruyne. Agree? So I think if there's a run of fixtures where you're looking at captaining Haaland for 6 or 7 game weeks, you're happy with Haaland and KDB because they'll tick. But we are opportunistic FPL players here, and we'll always look for the fixture difficulty difference between, looking as soon as game week 9, where Salah's playing a Brighton at home and Haaland is playing United. I think all three of us are leaning towards captaining somebody else if given a chance. So I think keeping, not you now, because after the Isak injury, but you were looking at Salah captain until yesterday's off?
Nope, I was going to bring Salah in, but not as captain. I don't see no reason to go against Haaland when you know he's nailed for 90 minutes.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, just looking at all of this, and I think you need to pay weightage that Salah has earned himself a ton of goodwill over the last 5 years, and you take that slightly low down patch with a pinch of salt. I am saying that we can't confidently say that Salah's superior as an asset to these two. If nothing, these two deserve at current rate of form to be mentioned in the same breath as Mo Salah. And the factor that I can't look beyond is that Son is still 1.2, 1.3 million cheaper than Salah. So it depends on how you're allocating funds. If you don't want to play the fixtures, like in my opinion, if I was in Wildcard, I'd go Mo Salah game week 9 because I think he's the best captaincy option in game week 9. And I'd like to play the shifting around the big hitters, but everybody's not comfortable shifting around big hitters. And you need a lot of factors to fall into place for you to play that way. But if you're not playing the fixtures, I don't think you need to be married to Mo Salah until things change. That's fair. What do you guys think?
Pras, you first.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the alpha premium has changed. So there is another person who will be the glue guy, and the other guy you can kind of shift around. So then it comes down to captaincy, like you said. So if you want to punt against Haaland, who do you want to go for? So there is an opportunity in game week 9. If you wanted to go Salah, you don't have to. There's an opportunity in game week 11 when you could go Son or Kane. There is an opportunity. Well, you're forced into the opportunity in game week 12 when you have basically the blank, so you won't have Haaland. Those are the ways you need to sort of think about your team. So if you don't care about a Salah against Brighton and you're happy with your Son or a De Bruyne, there's absolutely no need to get the Salah. Equally, if you're happy to captain Mitrovic in game week 11, then you don't need to have a Kane or a Son in your team, and or you may even want to captain Haaland against or Salah against City. So that completely depends on your choice. But game week 12 will be the first point where you're almost forced into a move, because you'll have Haaland probably sitting on the bench, or maybe you'll transfer him out for Kane. Who do you captain in game week 12? And that's when it comes down to how do you get to a path where you want to get to a Salah potentially. So that's basically my thought on that. I mean, Zoff, if you wanted to add.
I think let's just dial it back a bit and let's analyze what's up with Salah. From what I read a few threads on the Liverpool Reddit that they have changed the system a little bit. They are playing now with underlapping wingbacks. And this makes sense. We've seen Robertson make these late runs into the box like a striker, something which he did at the tail end of last season. So perhaps they've changed something maybe to accommodate Nunes, play to Nunes' strengths. Now the question in my mind is, does Klopp go that, okay, this is not working, scrap it, go back to what was working? If that's the case, I like what will happen, like, with Mo, because you see him coming a lot more central. That's one. Number two is the introduction of Diogo Jota. He's previously mentioned that Jota is a guy who sort of brings the attributes of Firmino and Nunes. So he'll possibly bring Salah into play a little more. So I like these factors. And again, after the Brighton fixture, you have Arsenal away and Man City. Those two are not that great. But again, we are talking about captaining Salah in, I think, possibly 3 of the next 4. So where he's possibly an option, or at least 2 of the next 4, 9 and 12. So if I was possibly going with one now, it would be Salah on Wildcard. I think I'm pretty clear on that.
Yeah, I think I would not go with De Bruyne if I was on Wildcard. It would be between Son and Salah for me. The problem again with Son is they're playing midweek football every week. And I feel like when it comes to expected minutes, Salah's over Son because of what Richarlison has shown. I don't know if... and I almost feel like that's going to be a factor because Kulusevski is the creative person in that Spurs team. So there could be the odd rest or rotation for Heung-min Son. But Son, objectively looking at price, given current state, not taking Salah's 4 years goodwill into consideration is better than Salah at the moment. We know for a fact that he's going to be a striker in that Spurs team. We don't know for a fact that Salah is going to be central in that Liverpool team. That said, Zoff, I'm with you. I think Klopp's going to change things. I think Klopp's going to say, I don't have Mane, who was my primary goal scorer. I need to put my best striker of the ball closer to goal instead of being the creative person. And I think we're going to see Salah back. I think that's just instinct. Like, if I could, I would try to get Salah. And I'm with you. Picking today, and especially because I want to captain him in Game Week 9, see, what also really blows my mind is people think that if they're going for Salah right now, they can't get Son. If you made a bet with a premium, you have to stick with that bet. No, you don't have to. Like, if it doesn't work and you feel like Son's doing better, just click that button. Salah to Son is one transfer. And you're getting upside. You're getting wider distribution curves in both games. And I don't know how that works from an analytical point of view, but it's how I play the game and how I like playing the game, where you're consistently chasing that upside and it works. So yeah, that's where I'm.
That's my thinking as well. I think I have never contemplated not going Salah on this wild card, but that does not mean that he's far and away the best choice. It's just basically I want him in 12, and I'm okay with having him in 9, and I'll live with the Arsenal and the City fixture. I mean, last year I made this point earlier. Last year people triple captain Salah in game week 29, especially those that wildcarded in 26, like myself. It was a double game week. One of the games was away to Arsenal. In the Community Shield earlier this year, Salah scored a penalty and had an assist against Man City. So it's not like it's a perma blank, you're certainly kind of giving away points. You just write them. I mean, these guys can score in any game.
And the City Liverpool game, last 7-8 fixtures has averaged 4 goals. That's been a game full of goals. And I also feel like given how the league is shaping up, Klopp has to go for it. Like,
he does. He needs the points more.
He needs the points more. So I think I'll see an aggressive team from Klopp in that team. So I don't mind these tough fixtures for attackers, because then you're relying on the skill set of the attacker, and that's pretty high. I feel like more often than not, the attackers win in such big games compared to the defender.
In an ideal world, Sorry, Pras,
Sorry,
go
go
ahead. I was just saying an ideal would possibly get Salah this week and move him on to Sun for the next 2 weeks. You get the Brighton
needed.
if needed. It also depends how good Sun looks. But if you're going to play the fixtures, you get Brighton this week, then you get Brighton again and then Everton, and then possibly move him back for 12. I think 12. Sun has United away.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pras, go ahead.
I was actually making the same point that in the Game Week 9 wildcard, you have no planned transfers. If you start with the Salah, you don't have to move him out, but you can move him out because you have nothing else sort of pre-planned between now and Game Week 13.
And also, let's face it, if Salah's bracing, nobody's selling him. That's essentially what's going to happen. If Salah braces, nobody's going to think of selling him despite the fixtures. Because everybody's going to say most back and fairly so. He's earned that weightage over the last 5 years. So
Let's talk about non-wildcarders now. Let's talk about guys like us, or me specifically, who owns KDB from like game week 8 now. I'm looking at this as a period of 3 fixtures, right? Now, obviously, you have this week, Salah has a better fixture, but then next week, you're again looking at Southampton at home for KDB, which is a sort of good fixture. So it sort of balances it out. And then game week 11, when they play each other, Salah is slightly better, but City, you could say, are the better attack. I think if captaincy is not an issue, do you need to make the move? Like, I've kept the money in the bank. Do I need to make the move, or do I need to prioritize something like Isaac to Tony? What do you guys think?
that's the dilemma, isn't it? Because my initial instinct, we spoke about this when we heard about the Isaac news, is like, I want to focus on the captaincy. And at the moment, I mean, I don't think I'm going to captain a City player based on what's happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks, whatever. And you want to give your team that much respect. That could have bias, but I'm somebody who's wanting to spend transfers on the bigger players always. But that's how I play the game. Like, I don't really care about player 8, 9, 10, 11 as much as I probably should, which is potentially a mistake in the way I play the game. But the thing is, you need to pick, because if you're chasing the upside consistently, you need to have enough shots at chasing that upside to hit a few. You can't do, I'll try it today and then I won't try it for the next 4. Then you're not going to be anywhere. Like, I need to pick. So if you ask me, I think captaincy matters. That said, I think Maddison, if you're not wanting to punt if you don't want to go for the safety blanket of a Haaland this week, I think Maddison is a high upside punt this week. I have nothing against captaining him against a Forest team that has shown to crumble in short stints of 20, 30 minutes. And Leicester have not shown anything wrong in attack. So that's where I am.
Sure. I mean, my boring answers off is, if you're not captaining, then there's no need to.
Don't need to make it. Because, I don't think so. I personally still feel City could get 2 or 3 against United.
It's Game Week 9. Man United is the opponent, and there is a popular captain, and people are looking to back against it. We've been there last season. Now, I hope Haaland doesn't score a hat-trick. But look, Man United, I think, usually... I'm a little bit more pessimistic than Pranal. I love the fact that you're so optimistic.
I'm pessimistic as well. I'm pessimistic. I just don't want to do it this time around. Like, that's all.
I just feel it's at the Etihad, and City will be dominant. They will have the ball. So all it takes is basically one early goal, and McTominay looks shaky. Now, I really, really hope we put in a performance. Man United has done well against Arsenal and Liverpool. That is something to take notice of. So that's not something that you can sort of ignore. But it can equally be one where sort of it shows up that the progress isn't there yet, and we still have a lot of work to do.
Make no mistake, there's a huge difference in quality at the moment. I do not expect us to win the game. It's just when you're captaining, and in my head I'm thinking, who has more hat-trick potential? It's Mo Salah.
Oh, sure.
That's what I'm wired to think. It's not more like I don't want to captain a City player. It's where can I chase the hat-trick?
But there are unknowns there, because you don't know what Brighton, you're banking on Brighton being a lot more open, because what we've read about De Zerbi, them being like a lot more attacking, leaving a lot more spaces, playing out from the back, etc., etc. You're banking on some unknowns there. With Haaland, it's a bit of an unknown quantity. So that's where our playing style difference is there. I'd rather go with the tried and tested, and you're willing to gamble on the unknown.
Yep. That's fair. That's it. Mo Salah is a known quantity, and like you said, we love the fact that he's. I think it's worth mentioning on the podcast that he's coming back. He's not playing the second game in that international break, so he's got 1 full week of training, and this is second phase of the season. I think teams are going to hit their stride now, and I think a lot of the things that have happened in the first 6-7 game weeks, I mean, you tone that down by 15, 20, 30% because new form happens now after the international break.
Right. Anything more to add on this? Move on to the next discussion.
The only thing I would add before we move is when we talk about Son, we're forgetting about Kane. So obviously we're going to talk about attackers, but Kane is cheaper than Son for the first time in FPL history. And structurally, I mean, people are talking about three strikers. Suddenly we're struggling to have three strikers. I mean, there are enough good strikers, but I would say it's not a mandatory that you can't go Haaland and Kane. And I think some did in Wildcard 8 as well.
Yep. It is personally, I've trusted Kane a lot. I have a little bit of negative bias association there. Since last season, I trusted him a lot. And every time I didn't have Son, and Son absolutely smashed me. Like I've had negatives. I must have lost 50, 60 points in that Kane versus Son last season. And after that, it's nailed down, hammered in my head that Son's the better asset.
My only problem with Kane is I do feel there are strikers who can match him at like, similar price. We talked about Isak. He's obviously now injured. Now we're talking about Tony, etc. So there are possibly other alternative options there who may not get the same hauls he does, but like if Kane's getting a 12, this guy's getting a 9-ish at about 3 to 4 million cheaper. In midfield, I'm not finding those guys as much. There are a few. That's my main reason for not advocating Kane. Now, should we talk about the budget mids first, or should we jump to the forwards?
Mids.
Let's do the mids first. Yes. Yeah. These are the sub 8 million mids plus. You had sent me this graphics. Now, Anthony is somebody who's on top, obviously, much limited sample size. Zaha comes in after. Grealish comes in fourth. Quite, I think, because Foden is out of the budget over here. What are your thoughts on these guys, plus?
So it's a topic of discussion for Wildcard 9 because sort of I'm thinking, is Martinelli essential? That's where this discussion came in. And basically, there's two things people say. One is there's so much value tied up. We got him at 6. He's now 6.6. So I'm going to lose 0.3 in value. So my answer to that one is, look, there's enough options here that you see in the table that are in and around the same price bracket. Why are you married to the price? I mean, even at 6.3, which is the sale value, he's fine. I mean, there's no problem with buying a Martinelli back at 6.6 when you made a 0.3 profit. You look at Zaha, you look at the Man United boys, you look at, Grealish will come back at some point. If you're talking about Brighton being so good, then Trossard and Gross will come back at some point. There's so many options. And then you look at what Arsenal's fixtures. So the second argument that people have is Arsenal's fixtures were very good and they're turning, but Arsenal have been good throughout. Even though Man United, they lost, but they were very good. This I'd take. I think Arsenal are a good team and they have improved quite a bit. He's nailed. But I'm looking at his underlying and I'm saying, look, I don't want to have this guy for the period. I definitely probably want to have him after Game Week 12. But I'm not married to him. And if I have to pick between Cancelo and Martinelli as the one guy I want to sort of keep for the blank, it's Cancelo. So that was the thinking of sharing this. And one other point I wanted to share is if you look at Martinelli's fixtures after Game Week 16, I know we're going way forward. But what I was trying to say is even on our wildcard in Game Week 16, it's not a guarantee we'll have Martinelli because after Game Week 16, they have Wolves away, West Ham, Brighton away, Newcastle, Spurs away, Man United. So you could choose to still have Martinelli, but I want to basically get rid of this shackles of team value. I want to look at Martinelli only because of that. And that was my thinking.
Goff?
Yeah, I don't buy the team value argument at all. And I do like moving off him now because it's a very easy route back to him, right? Let's say you get somebody like Maddison. To downgrade to Martinelli around Game Week 13 when Maddison has a downward swing of fixtures is quite easy. But at the same time, I'm not seeing any midfield replacements at that price that can go near him still. Because you see the guys on here, Gross, Odegaard, maybe we're seeing some glimpses of him. Rashford, maybe. But everybody else over here, nobody else really inspires confidence. Zaha is probably a glue guy. So he's going to be the irrespective of Martinelli, so he doesn't really enter the conversation as such. So if you're going to go without Martinelli, plus, like you said, you have to probably go in defense.
Yeah.
Or Zoff, if somebody is going most Son, going Threemim and then going Maddison and Zaha on wildcard, and then dropping the Martinelli slot. So if you're going up that midfield slot, I think that's also a conversation.
That's also an option, but I'm just saying, but within that same price, I still think he's by far and ahead the best option.
Fair,
yeah,
fair.
I think so too.
At least in the next 4.
My thinking with Martinelli, Pras, is that he's the easiest to let go of, but I don't think it's the right thing to do of let go of him. Because firstly, I also think the matchups sort of suit him. If you're talking about games against difficult opposition, he's the pacey guy on the counter that sort of suited.
Both true next to at home.
In the last 2 or 3 games, I've seen him more central than Gabriel Jesus in that Arsenal team when I'm watching the games. So that's another thing. He still potentially could have penalties. I don't think we know for sure who's on penalties between Saka and Martinelli as yet. And he's got the ticking factor of having half the set pieces. So I think these are sort of factors which add up for a 6 to 6.5 million asset. And I also think it's easier to hide a 6.5 million midfielder in a blank than it is to a 12 million asset. I feel like if you're planning your transfers or making the shift or something of that sort, in Game Week 12, Son has Everton at home. Like, make that shift, play the big hitter in that game where there's a potential for a double digit haul. So that's where I am. I don't mind it though. I don't mind it, but I think I'd have swerved other positions personally.
I mean, he's competing against Cancelo, essentially, in my mind, in my team,
Yeah.
because for me, Haaland could go to Kane, but I probably won't do that. It's nice to say and plan, but it's probably not something you do. So then how many do you bench? And I want to bench 2 City. And I'm thinking then I don't want Martinelli as well, because then I'll have to play all my 11 and there always injuries come up. So I just want to sort of have only 2 from City and Arsenal. That's the thinking. So it's either be Martinelli or Cancelo, and that's the only rationale where I'm thinking I can go against Martinelli. I completely get the logic, but I feel I have also a nice way to get him back, because Maddison I don't need after 12.
Correct. That's my
So
thought
basically-
also. On 12, I'm probably thinking of doing something like Martinelli to Gordon, because Everton's fixtures are really good from 13 on. And then from 13, do Maddison to Martinelli.
So
Yeah.
in a way, you'll hold him for the 1 good Leeds game and 2 semi-difficult game, although I get the argument that he'll probably be relevant. I mean, we saw against Man United, the classic goal that he scored, which was ruled offside. That is, you can imagine that those are the kinds of goals he'll be involved in if they score. So I completely get the argument, but I'm sort of thinking, can I swerve these 4, have a better Game Week 12 team, and play the mighty Solanke, who plays, the four really, really easy fixtures, and we'll come to strikers.
Yeah. Before that, I think there are a few names we need to talk about now when we're looking at this mid-price assets. I think Maddison, Zaha, Martinelli are in contention for everybody. I think one person we need to throw in is Phil Foden, because if we're swerving KDB on the second big hitter, I think Foden is a serious conversation we all need to have, because he's central. Again, all the factors that apply to KDB in terms of them almost winning their UCL group. Now we all agree that he's first choice in that City front 3. So that's one name. And then there are a few sort of names outside which are sort of punts that managers say, okay, you all wouldn't fully consider. Now, I'm talking about somebody like Harvey Barnes. I'm talking about somebody like Coutinho. I'm talking about somebody like Sinisterra. We are playing the fixtures essentially as punts for the next 4 or 5 fixtures. Any of them entice you at all?
Sinisterra I looked at, but my problem is if I look at any of those guys, then I think, why not Martinelli? That's the honest truth.
That's pretty much what's going to be my answer, that I don't think any of them are better than Martinelli per se.
Yeah. I just think if you're playing fixtures, the fixtures are there to play with Aston Villa. Because it's the same thing where why I'm always attracted to a team like Aston Villa is I think that the players are good, the attackers are good. In terms of the caliber of the players that they have, when you're talking about Coutinho, Leon Bailey, etc. The fixtures read Leeds, Forest, Fulham, and Brentford. That said, I think I've pretty much come around to the fact, because before I knew about the Isak injury, my planned transfers were KDB and Kulusevski to either Mo or Son and Zaha or Coutinho. And I thought Coutinho looked sharp. But I tried to reason everything out, and I don't see a world in which you can pick a Coutinho over Zaha and think that is the correct decision. That's where I am. So if you're asking me rankings, Zaha's up there. But if you're in the mood to do something frisky, if you trust somebody like I have a weakness for somebody like him. So that's where we are. Because fixtures play into form, and Leeds and Forest are two of the best fixtures for attackers as things stand.
I mean, he looked on it in the last game, to give it to Coutinho.
Yeah.
I mean, Bailey was ruining all the plays. I mean, he got better back end of the first half, but Coutinho looked good.
But I've been speaking to Villa fans and they've all put me off it, because they're like, Gerrard's approach now is pragmatism. So if you want to punt on any of our players, go defenders, not attackers.
Correct.
They've sort of... And they don't even... The Coutinho, the problem is also is a 60, 70-minute man, not a 90-minute man. So that's also a fact.
That's the point I was going to make. That a couple of bad games, you see Buendia. And the thing is with Gerrard, since Michael Beale left, the assistant manager, they've been on a downward trajectory. And it matters. The backroom staff and the number 2 guy matters a lot for these clubs. So generally, I'm very downbeat on Villa. I wouldn't recommend anything over there.
But what do you guys think about Phil Foden when you're putting
Game
him
week
up
12.
against somebody like... Game week 12. Play the fixtures out and then get him. Not right now.
That's my issue.
Phil
Simply
Foden is
game
the
week 12.
reason why I don't think third Liverpool is necessary. Him and Saka, because both of them are way higher in my mind to a Diaz. And if Diaz becomes that great, then he's even better than Salah. That was my thinking actually with the third Liverpool. So I think Foden is amazing and Saka is great as well.
Zoff, before we move into the striker section, I think right now is a good time to get those brackets of 2 fixtures for the 4 teams, because I think that's something we need to make our listeners aware of. And this is the primary thing, because in game week 12 you have a blank for Arsenal and City, and then game week 13 and 14 is high volume points. I think we're going to see a big difference in the points that we see on Twitter, etc., because Arsenal have Southampton away and Forest at home in 13-14. Liverpool have Forest away and Leeds at home in 13-14. Spurs have Newcastle at home and Bournemouth away, and City have Brighton at home and Leicester away. Now these are the potential for any of these teams to score 5 goals over these 2 fixtures is very high. So whatever you do, whether you're building your wildcard, whether you're setting up your team, be mindful and be open to a -4, -8 in terms of how you're going to get the big guys in game week 13. I think that's something you just need to be very mindful about. And I think at this juncture, a lot of us managers might be taking a mini wildcard in terms of -4, -8. And I'm all for it, because I feel like if you're getting good players from good teams, the chances of you catching a haul are higher if you get them early. It's just basic probability, where they have a chance to make up a haul in a game like Forest, etc. as well. And then there's good fixtures to follow as well. So that's just something to keep in mind.
I would in fact say, looking at this, that people should sort of look at their team as they're looking for rough planned transfers and think how many of these players from these 4 teams will you land up on in game week 13, and that will sort of help you decide how many do you want to bench in game week 12, how many, because a lot of people are thinking, okay, I'll just go Cancelo to Trent and KDB to Salah in game week 12. Well, then you won't have Cancelo and KDB in game week 13, so you sort of need to think through that.
Also, Pras, game week 13 needs Forest away, game week 14 needs Leeds at home for Liverpool. Would you be surprised if Liverpool smash 8 goals over these 2 games? That's why I just wanted to talk you out of Alisson.
No, I hear you. But see, the thing is, at that point, if I had an Alisson, of course I can't go for a Diaz. But my point is, then I'll go for a Saka or I go for a Foden, because those are also amazing 8-goal games.
Yeah, I understand. But I think Forest and Leeds are significantly higher.
I agree.
Like that's the point. And Liverpool are a more known quantity in attack. That's all.
Sure. This is why for me, game week 12 is the moment everyone needs to plan to get Salah, unless something fundamentally changes.
The fundamental thing here is also that in game week 12, Son plays Everton at home.
No.
Like Zoff,
no. Game week 12 he plays United away.
United away. Oh, it's the fixture before 11, that he plays
it's
Everton.
11. When Liverpool
11,
Man City clash.
Yeah. Fair. So because that's the reason for Son also, because they have a on paper tough fixture. It's a different Arsenal, but in his last 6 games against Arsenal, Son has 4 goals and 4 assists. Like he's a big game player as well. So that's a factor. You could happily go ahead with Son and still 1.2 million cheaper. If you don't want to captain Salah, then I think Son is the big hitter you go.
I think another point to be made here is not necessarily swerve the assets from this team just because of a game week 12 blank. Because even if you miss out on let's say you feel 9 or 10 that week, the upside is more in the weeks after. You'll be more in the short term sabotaging your team for the gain that in a week that might be a low upside week anyway, for the weeks that are 13, 14, 15, where we see there is the upside for these guys. So that's something also to be mindful of.
But also, I feel like information is important. Like right now, like we were discussing about Klopp and him playing Salah wide or getting him central. I think by the time game week 13 arrives, we'll know what Klopp has decided and what rotation might look like, etc. as well. And I think that game week 13 fixture, NFO, is an early lunch kickoff after a Wednesday game for Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken.
That is after West Ham. They play West Ham midweek and then early kickoff on Saturday for Forest.
Yeah.
And it'll come after a City rest, midweek rest.
Yeah. That's something to be mindful about.
Right. Forwards?
True. I mean, the man everybody needs to talk about, because I think it's obvious that all 3 of us are on the same wavelength, where it's Haaland, Mitrovic +1. I think we're just going to not bother talking Haaland, Mitrovic. I'm going to discuss the +1.
Correct.
Yeah.
So obviously now we've got news that if you guys are not aware that Isaac is probably out for a few weeks. It's not purely just an IB injury. So few weeks implies more than 2. So it's not a case where you bench him, play Andreas and all that stuff. I think he's very much a transfer that needs to happen. And now he's mentioned Wilson needs to be wrapped in cotton wool. That doesn't fill me with confidence either. at all for a player who's so injury prone. So is it a simple move to Tony? But I think plus you want to talk up Mr. Dominic Solanke. Go for it.
Look, I mean, there's no agenda with Solanke. I mean, the idea is that I feel like you will need money elsewhere on the pitch other than your third striker. And so whether you go Kane, that's a different argument. But for me, as we're talking about these fixtures in game week 13 and beyond, we will need money in midfield or in defense, whether you go for a Robertson or, or a Foden or a Saka. And so I feel like if you're going for a 7-8 million guy, then you're locking yourself in unless you go the Jesus route. So you have to sort of think about where you want to land in game week 13, and therefore you take the punt. Of course, Tony is, he's excellent, as you can see in the stats in his non-pen XGI. He has pens as well to top it off. He's been the go-to guy, as you guys have mentioned in the pod before, they're almost leads like this season. So there's nothing wrong with the Tony move. I just caution that people should look at, will that lock them out of something else that they want to do in game week 11? That's my issue.
And why Dominic Solanke is a conversation here is because the fixtures. I think Zophar, if you can just move to the fixture ticker, because I think it's worth pointing out how good Bournemouth's fixtures really are. And except for that fixture ticker, they don't really have anything at the moment.
Correct.
But it reads Brentford at home, Leicester at home, Fulham away, Southampton at home, West Ham away, Spurs at home, Leeds away, Everton at home.
The short-term 4 are really good.
This is like if you go to a laboratory and say, lab, get me a good run of 8 fixtures that I can perma play one player. These are the run of fixtures that they come. But the problem is for Dom Solanke. But I absolutely buy the argument because, again, I see myself in game week 13 wanting more funds for the other 5, 6, 7 attacker spots. And that's a good enough reason, in my opinion, to go for somebody like who's going to play 90 minutes. I just think you need to temper your expectations if you're going for somebody like this, who's he's not very expensive also. It's 5.7.
5.7.
Yeah, so I think that's an argument. Where else do you swerve? Zoff, you're looking at going Ivan Toney, which I think is completely fine too. It's just about future-proofing your transfers and seeing where you're going to spend transfers elsewhere. And I think that's the decision to make.
That's pretty much because the thing with Solanke, he was pivotal in terms of XG involvement under Parker. But I don't know when these guys are going to hire a new manager. They've not done it over the IB, so I guess they're not going to. There's some noises about ownership changing and stuff, so it might happen only after the World Cup. And the current manager seems a lot more defensive, much better organized in terms of defense. But at home, you see the next 3 out of the next 4 at home, he might be a bit more expansive. But from what I'm seeing billing, it seems to be a lot more attacking in this current setup. I'm not seeing Solanke getting the kind of service, and they are I think in terms of XG3 for the season,
they're rubbish.
They're very poor.
But Zoff, that game was Newcastle. Newcastle were always going to dominate possession.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. So at home, he might set up completely differently.
Yeah.
But I think he is in general, I know very little of him, a bit more defense first.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think what Pranal is saying, temper expectations, expect maybe 1 or 2 returns over the next 4. He gets you a game week 12 slot, which is very important. Basically, he has Southampton at home in game week 12. I would even say don't play him. Don't play him in the other fixtures if there is a dilemma or if you think that, if he's not showing the form. So for me, my thinking is I have the guy. He's going to play. He's going to be nailed, but I don't need to sort of play him. He can be the person who can be my placeholder for a Martinelli if I need to downgrade him and move my midfielder back up. Or I can just bench him after game week 12. So I just need him until game week 12 to sort of get me these fixtures. 2 returns and I'm happy.
I think you have to play him. If you get him for the next 4 fixtures, a guy who's on penalty, he's definitely not a bench option for these 4. You're going to be...
After 4, yeah. I meant after 4.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think for next 4, he's not bad. I just think there are points potentially there for Tony. If you look at the fixtures, they're a bit of a mixed bag. You see Bournemouth away, you see some points, and Newcastle away, very frugal at home. Brighton, again, we expect them to be a lot more open. Chelsea, Villa, Wolves. So the fixtures aren't great for Tony as well.
So I'm an Isak owner and I almost don't want to make a decision because I want information. Because, what are my realistic options at the moment? Moving to Tony or Solanke? If I'm looking at outside punts based on fixtures, I'm looking at Watkins because I really like the Leeds and NFO games for a runner like Watkins as well. And then there is a punt on Bamford, who we know that Leeds are an attacking team. 3 or 4 weeks ago, he got 45 minutes. So he must have been working on his fitness. And then there's taking a shot in the dark on a team like Leeds that is a front foot team that are going to get goals. And then you blindly trust that. And what might happen in the future in the next, which is why I'm less inclined to make the decision right now. Because first thing I did when I heard about the Isaac news was look at Andreas's fixtures, and he's playing Newcastle at home, and Neco Williams is playing Leicester away. Now Leicester, you're not expecting clean sheets, but he could spike a goal. Or Andreas is playing a home game, you're hoping that he gets an assist or something of that sort. Because in the future, Jota or Nunes could become options. We don't know what's going to happen with Chelsea. Oba and Kai might come into the picture. That might evolve as a situation in the next 1 or 2 game weeks, and then you jump on the fact, because these guys have big games throughout as well. So I feel like if you also want to postpone the decision, playing Andreas against Newcastle at home isn't a bad call, because Fulham at home are a different team. So that's also an option if you. And even going down, if you want to make your bet today, going down to a 4.3 million to afford a premium draft, because again you're thinking 13 to 16, I want 3 premiums because a lot of these big teams have great fixtures. That also is probably an option.
Okay. I mean, Zoff, question to you: if you go Tony, would you not lock yourself out of a Trent in the future? Like if you wanted a 4th defender or even upgrade Trippier?
Yep. That's the structure I have currently. I can't afford a 4th defender that's greater than 4.5. If I want, then I have to probably sell Zaha.
No, so that was the thinking. Basically, if you wanted to downgrade him to even a cheapo, that's an option if you want to structurally change. But I guess there's no right answer. Tony is a fine pick.
That's the thing. I think there are points there from Tony to be had. That's where because we spoken about Brentford. That's simply that reason. I think Tony could get like close to 30 points in the next 4 games. That's purely the reason.
Good. But I get the reasoning for Solanke. I'm not against it at all. Like the price is a factor there. That's all.
I'll come to my wildcard draft. I'm still not sold on him. So I don't want to sort of
bring up your wildcard draft.
Solanke is a no-brainer.
Yeah, let's get process wildcard draft.
Right.
All right. Shall I read it out?
Yes, please.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I've got Alisson and Iverson in goal, and the thinking is Iverson will probably take up the jersey soon, so I'll have a second keeper. I'm not punting on Ward saying anyway. So it's 50-50, so I'll save the 0.1. I've got a 4 at the back, so I've got Trent, Trippier, Cancelo, and James, who I think are the top 4 defenders if I had to pick. Now, it's another question if you wanted to go 3 at the back, but these are the 4, and then I've got Guehi as the 5th. In midfield, I've gone lighter than normal, so I've got Salah, Maddison, and Zaha, which most teams will have, and I have Andreas. The 5th one I don't like, which is Bailey. I'll come to why I have him, and then I have Solanke, Mitrovic, and Haaland up top. So fairly standard. I think that the big changes are no Martinelli, a different keeper, a 4th defender, and Solanke. That's basically the thinking. I can easily switch this draft to having a Pope in defense, in goalkeeper, and I can have Martinelli and a 4.3 attacker instead of Bailey and Solanke. And the reason I've got Bailey and Solanke is simply because those 2 guys have decent game week 12 fixtures. It gets me through the next 4 weeks, and then I can reassess.
Is Bailey going to be on your bench? 9 and 10?
Bailey is never playing.
Bailey's
except
Bailey will be behind Andreas. He'll be behind Andreas. I think 3rd, so will probably be
Forest
behind
and Forest and Leeds are great fixtures, Pras. Like I think Bailey is fine if you want to, push funds elsewhere, because there are goals there in those games. Forest and Leeds, that's what they do. They offer goals to their opposition. Brentford scored 5 against Leeds United. So I don't know. I'd be uncomfortable. Like if I'm doing that, I would concentrate more funds on the pitch. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'd do. That's all. But outside of your keepers, I wouldn't want to talk you out of any of the theories. I just think keep that spot open for Liverpool. I feel quite strongly about that. That's the one.
I may end up going 2 4.5 keepers. I may end up going Pope. I'm not sold on any, and I think anyway I spend least brain power on goalkeepers because I feel like they will over the 8 game weeks they will all score similarly. I mean, I'd be very, very unlucky if I lost 20 points to Pope, no matter who I picked. Equally, I could just be boring and say, let's just go. Everyone's going Pope, so let me go Pope.
My only thinking about Trent is I would still like that spot to be an attacker, because I think you can gain possibly more from an attacker over the next 3 to 4 weeks than Trent. I'm still not very confident in terms of.
I think the bet he's making off is that there are more points to earn 13 to 16.
Correct.
I think that's what he's
exactly getting him in place, and then for that run, I guess. Just in the short term, I would prefer to have more attackers on the pitch, I think.
See, going back to game week 13, my team has double Liverpool, double City, and I'm not going to move those 4 guys out. And then I can sort of spend my transfers going into game week 13 on more of these players. So I can get the Foden, I can get the Martinellis back. That's the thinking, that I'll be better placed in 13. And then, it's Trent, man. I mean, Trent scored against City in the Community
Yeah.
Shield. So, I mean, when were we ever afraid of having Trent, highest XA of all defenders in the game?
Also, I think Zoff, because he's making the bet against Martinelli, I think there are only certain number of transfers you'll
Correct.
want to put in that 13 period. So that's also
That's fair.
probably a factor in your thinking.
See, one route I could go is worth talking about is that I'm thinking is if I went Pope and instead of Solanke I had a 4.3 striker and I had Martinelli instead of Bailey, this would be more sort of template. The only thing is then I have a dud striker and I have 3 players from City and Arsenal. So therefore, I need to do some surgery in 12, and that surgery could be, for example, Cancelo to Robertson just for game week 12, and then find another way to get Cancelo. But I feel like I'll fall behind in game week 13. That's my main problem.
Given the last 1.5 hours of conversation that we've had, because it's refreshed a lot in terms of after a lull, I'd just roll the dice on Guaita. I trust the manager that is Vieira. I trust the fixtures, and you would hope that I think there's a floor of at least 3 or 4 clean sheets there, given the fixtures the Palace has, and then take it from there. I think because I do feel like that 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, any sort of money that you squeeze out could be useful on the pitch, especially in that game week 13 to 18 period. So I also think it's worth pointing out now, because there's a little bit of chat that happened today where Argentina players are going to request their manager to not be played in the last 2 game weeks before the World Cup.
Yeah.
Now, I do wonder if players from other teams start doing something like this and we see something like that, because you're obviously going to think about big players from big teams. And I don't think people like Pep and Klopp are going to have any of it. But it's just something to point
There's
out.
going to be carnage.
Yeah.
I think the last
I
few
think
weeks there is possibly players who are playing like with slight niggles and all that stuff, possibly deciding to like not participate and all that stuff. So
I think we'll all be talking about 2 narratives leading to the World Cup. Who is not in the World Cup? So people like Salah, Haaland, Robertson, and people who are pushing for a place in the World Cup, like Madison or Bowen or Trent. So yeah, I think this will come up, and I think all of it makes sense.
Yeah. Just while we are here, we've got about 900 people in the chat. If you guys could just hit the like and subscribe button, we'd be very, very grateful. It helps us and it helps the YouTube algorithm and it helps us to be found. And if you like our work, please shout us out on Twitter or Instagram or wherever you guys are. And we also have a Discord where Pras is also part of our Discord, and we're hanging with everybody that we wanted to connect with. And it's just a good place to be. If you want to join our Discord, you can support us on Patreon or become a member on YouTube. Zoff, before we move any further, I think Chelsea attackers deserve a mention. Pras, Sterling was considered?
Yep, he was. It's just a shot in the dark is my issue. He's 10 million. It's not like, you're punting on a 7.7. I mean, I even thought about Mount, for example, in that position. I just don't know. What is. I mean, Oba doesn't really fit his style. Sterling fits his style, but will Sterling
Broja,
play
they're
this?
talking about this one thing we haven't even mentioned. There's a lot of talk over. So I'm sorry to interrupt you over preseason. This break about how Broja is actually factoring into his plans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just a wild card. We don't know how they will sort of set up. So Broja could be the Solanke placeholder, or Solanke could be the Broja placeholder. Who knows?
Yeah. Zoff, that one statement almost makes me want to delay the decision when it comes to Isak and just play Andreas this week and see what happens.
Yeah, you can never resist getting a Chelsea player in.
I can't. Especially if he's 5.5 million. Are you kidding me? I'll be right on that.
I'd want to see at least 2 games, at least 3 games, rather than just 1 game. Because there are too many options in our squad currently. And he has to give everybody a go. He has to give everybody a fair shot to have their chance. You see that you have Pulisic, etc. So many players in those front positions.
On that note, people like me who own Andreas and Neko, Fulham's next 3 fixtures are Newcastle at home, West Ham away, Bournemouth at home. And Forest's next 2 fixtures are Leicester away and Aston Villa at home. Just playable fixtures if you want to get by delaying some decisions, that's all.
Cool. Let's discuss. This is whose team? This is my team. I've got Pope in goal, Cancelo, Trippier, James, Zaha, Madison, Martinelli, KDB, Mitrovic, Haaland, Isak, Ward, Andreas, Zuma, and Nico Williams. I will probably be captaining Haaland. I've got 0.8 in the bank. The plan was to do De Bruyne to Salah, but I'll probably stick with KDB now and do Isak to Tony.
Cool.
Plus,
I
before
mean,
we
if you
move
don't
on,
go,
go ahead.
I was going to ask you, if you're not going Salah now, we were talking about this on our chat. So you're not going Salah now till 12, basically, because you're
Doesn't
not
make
going to
sense.
shift
I might go
KDB.
Sun next week if I like what I see, because just to attack the next two fixtures. But I like Southampton at home for KDB as well. And he's got a full week off. Belgium played yesterday on Sunday. So he's got effectively 7 days till the United game. So he gets a good period of rest also. I'm quite confident he'll start Copenhagen and Southampton after. Are you going to captain Haaland Press or Salah? I forgot to ask you for yours.
I would love to say Salah, but I'm going to leave it and see what
You're going to go Haaland, mate. I know.
Also, just worth pointing out actually that Zoff and I both received the Isak news an hour before we got on the pod. So thoughts in terms of planned transfers are very, very fresh. I think we've got 4 days of thinking in terms of what's going to happen after. So no way is this what we're going to be looking at.
I'm quite
maybe
confident
Fridays.
it will be, because I operate my team on the simple philosophy that you always fix the weakest link.
But I won't be surprised if you go cheaper to Solanke if you're forcing funds later used. Like, you will tinker and play around with your team tomorrow day after. Thoughts will become more concrete. So that's what.
That's fair. Your team up next, Ella.
Yeah, I've got Pope, Cancelo, Trippier, James, De Bruyne, Kulusevski, Madison, and Martinelli. Up front, I have Haaland, Mitrovic, and Isak. At the moment, I'm leaning towards delaying the striker decision and doing Kulusevski and KDB to Salah, who I'll cap, and either Zaha or Coutinho. It looks like it's probably going to be Zaha, because you will need sort of glue guys if you want to get the big hitters in.
But
later.
why? Why do you need to sell Kulusevski? Do you need the money?
Yep.
That's right. Because Zaha's in the fixture this week isn't that great. You could probably get away with Kulusevski. But if you need the money, then you're effectively taking a hit just to get to Captain Salah.
That's what I do.
Fair enough.
And that's why we love you.
Yeah, that's. But also, that's why also the slight temptation for Coutinho, because I'm like, there's a chance for a 10-pointer in there against Leeds. That's where I am. So yeah.
Let's do a short Q&A. We're already close to 90 minutes.
I think what's just giving De Zerbi 2 lines of mention why we're looking at somebody like Salah as a captaincy option is that with the Sassuolo team, he did have a tendency to concede a ton of goals as well. So they did get because of how we don't know how pragmatic he's going to be as a manager. He's very purist as a manager, plays a high possession game. So somebody like a Liverpool could punish him if he decides not to be pragmatic in that first game. So the attraction is there for this reason. Cool, let's do the Q&A.
Send in your questions, guys. We got around 900 in the chat.
Good pod.
While we're waiting for questions, you could even look at downgrading Isak, keeping Kulusevski, and then going KDB up. But again, I think you want to keep optionality on that slot.
Yeah, I just don't know where I want to go. And I'm still looking at the Jota slot. So I could even wait till Friday, Saturday, see if we get any team news and go Jota or Darwin, whoever's starting against the Brighton game. So that's something on my mind as well.
Good question that just came in. We didn't cover it. Is about when to wildcard if not this week. I think we should touch upon that.
12, 13. 12, 13. Yeah.
13 probably, I think, because 12 you dead end, you get rid of those guys and probably go in 13.
Yeah. I feel like if your team's good enough right now, it's fine not to wildcard. There's more points to fight for in 13, I feel like, almost.
KDB to Salamat. Any other Leicester
FPL
City
Nim.
fans? Go ahead.
Nim is
We talk
asking a
about
question.
Vardy or Daka. I don't know we'll have no clarity, but that's a nice striker slot. I mean, same reasons for why Madison is great, but we won't know.
Yeah. I just noticed one quote in the post-match presser after the Leicester game where Rodgers did say that, yes, Vardy is old now and his age is a factor now, which makes both of them a non-option because I feel like he might rotate that spot. So,
correct.
We got a question from Karan Pras. We'll come to you with this one. Pick one on wildcard, lads. Solanke, Trent, or Tony and Martinelli. It's what Pras's dilemma is.
That's what I have answered with my wildcard draft, which is Solanke and Trent. Look, for me, Trent is the opportunity. For me, before the season started, he was the number one player in the game. I can't see how 6 game weeks has changed my opinion. So this is my Trent Salah wildcard. So there is whichever option you'll give me, Trent will be in that.
Cool. Zoff, would you pick that?
I like Tony Martinelli.
All right.
Much more known quantities and feel a sort of more steady eddies, more of my sorts of pick. The other two guys feel a lot more explosive. In terms of Solanke could get a brace at any fixture because if the Bournemouth score, very likely to be involved. But the other two guys more steady eddies.
Is Billing a good budget midfield pick with the fixtures?
He's
Not
been,
for me.
He's what, 5.5?
Yeah.
I think there's
There are
better
many
value.
other picks.
Yeah, the better picks. The thing with Solanke at 5.7 makes more sense.
I mean, I'd just go Bailey if I was going.
Even Neto.
Billing.
I
Yeah,
remember
even-
him. He's 5.1
Yeah.
now.
Guys,
or
this is game
something.
week 9
Even
and we're
you.
still talking about Bailey and Neto.
All right. Question from Nehal on Wildcard 13. What are priority picks to match the Wildcard 9? Oh, so I think Zaha Madison. I think those are the guys.
I think
Mitrovic
Zaha could possibly be delayed a week, but Madison is a player I think you can take a hit for this week because it just sets you up for the next 4.
Yeah, and don't be fooled by the and don't be fooled by the Mitro blank against Forest either. I think you need to have him in place.
Plus, you might know this gentleman in the chat. His nickname is FPL Sonaldo. He's asking, would you guys captain Son this week versus Arsenal?
Should captain Son every week, man. I mean, why didn't you captain him last week is my question. I mean, look, he's got a great record, right? I mean, Pranal, you were mentioning his record against Arsenal.
4 goals, 4 assists, last 6. Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with it. Son. And that's in a game where, there's no standout captaincy. Yeah, you can go for something like this. Not a problem.
The thing with big games is they're never a minute's risk. That's the thing. So he will play and he will be up for it.
Also, it's the first game, so we will 100% have team news before that.
Correct.
It's the early kickoff on Saturday. So
nobody's getting benched. I think this is a sort of big game that Son definitely plays. I think Richarlison probably be used as impact sub. This game, I don't think minutes are a risk at all.
Correct.
I wish Salah had a slightly more difficult game because I'd go straight to Son because I like his 10-11. I feel like if you're getting Son in 9, then you're holding him till 16 because he'll just do what he does. Yeah.
Till 16?
Well, I think...
I don't know. One last question from Karan, a super chat. Madison cap this week. We had actually mentioned this earlier on. Good shout.
Good shout. I'd do it. If I don't get in Salah, I'm happy to captain Madison.
Cool. Let's wrap up. No more super chats, please, guys.
Thank you so much, Pras. By the way, before we wrap up, it's been a pleasure. It doesn't feel like we're podding with you for the first time. It just felt so natural, the flow of conversation. It's also because I believe we're soundboards for each other when we're discussing FPL. We're talking FPL throughout always. So it just felt very natural. And I'm pretty sure it won't be the last time we have you on here.
No, look, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And I echo that. I mean, all 3 of us, and in fact, many others in the circle, we sort of speak quite regularly before game week. So it felt very natural. I'm a big fan of the pod, so I wanted to say that. Look, I'm a happy patron, but also a happy friend. So I've been sort of, I love what you guys do. Always straight to the point. Always cover all the topics that are relevant. So big fan, and wish you guys all the best in growing the channel.
Thank you very much, Rash. On that note, see you guys next week.